Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Queer Careers video podcast, where we put a spotlight on LGBTQIA+ talent and inspire people to reach their career and development goals. Thank you for watching or listening. I am Marie-Charlotte Coury, Development Chair for Pride Inclusion Business Group, an employee resource at Expedia. I am a white woman with green eyes and brown hair. I wear big aviator-shaped glasses, a beige sweater, and a cream jacket. Today, I am with Michael Long, Director, Retail Partnerships, EMEA, and we both have a background picturing a rainbow, where Travel with Pride is written on top, as well as the number 1 with the words community, family, pride in one of the corners. And in the other 2 corners are the Queer Career logo and a little cozy workstation with some rainbow color elements. So this is the most I'm going to be talking today. Over to you, Michael. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more?
Sure, thank you, Marie. Yes, my name's Michael. My pronouns are he, him. I'm based in London, and as Marie said, I am the Director of Retail Partnerships EMEA for Expedia Group. I've worked within Expedia Group for, it'll be 18 years in September. I am a white male. I've got short, dark hair. I've blue eyes. I am wearing glasses, and I'm also wearing a blue shirt that's got yellow ducks on it as well. I would also say that I identify as a gay man.
Okay, so we're gonna dig into the questions about your development and your career. Describe your role and how do you organize your week?
So I've recently been promoted into the director role, but just to talk a little bit more about, in general, my team as retail partnerships, it's commonly referred to within industries or within our organization as affiliates. So they are external partners and websites and brands that send their customers through to our branded sites to become travelers and book their travel needs. So my team in particular, and what I do is look after the commercial account management team. So we are managing those relationships with those partners. And what we're doing on a weekly basis is finding how we can do promotions that really engage travelers and help them book their travel and choose our brands. Because what's slightly different about all of these partners that we work with, we're not necessarily exclusive in their environment. They are working with lots of our competitors. They are working across lots of different segments. So with fashion retailers, electronics, insurance, all of those different things. So it can be quite a lot to compete. So on a weekly basis, me and my team are often negotiating with those partners to say, hey, when can we be front and center of your brand and in your newsletter communications and on your homepage? How do we kind of cut through all of that and make sure that our deals and our products and our loyalty is kind of being showcased in the best way to attract those people through to our site. So I would say most of my team is doing that on a day-to-day basis. For me as director, of course, working a lot more each week on sort of like, what's our strategy? What's the shape of our team? How do we want to expand? So I build in time for that. And of course, people management is a big part of my role as well. So in terms of shaping my week, a lot of it is based around one-to-ones and connections with the team to understand how can I help with all of those promotions, the commercial planning, all of that side, but also in their personal and career development as well. That's a big chunk of what I focus on as well each week.
So I'm thinking about the big picture and empowering your team, right?
Correct. Yes, okay. 2 big things.
Perfect. Yeah, very, very important things. So the next question would be, what do you know now you wish you would have known before starting either in this position or in your career in general, because you've just started?
Yeah, so I think it's still relevant to, even though I'm only a month or so into this new role, the things that I wish I'd known all the way through my career is just having that level of confidence to be authentically you and bring your whole self to work, and that's, you know, really valuable. And that's how I found it as I've grown into that confidence. I guess I wish I'd had that like a long time ago when I first started working in different organizations. And I guess what I see as combining with that is that having that confidence allowed, and now it allows me to network very in a way easily, or like more easily. I'm more comfortable to kind of like talk to people of different levels, or like, you know, if I think that's interesting, I'd like to learn more, how do I kind of, you know, go about finding out how they got into that role, I would proactively do that. And I wish I'd kind of known that a little bit earlier on, because I think probably when I reflect on like my sort of start in career, I was probably a bit too much focused on like, oh, well, they're 3 levels above, and I shouldn't really like talk to them about this, or I can't sort of like talk to them about anything like personal, let's say. It's like, just keep it to business chat and things. But actually, when we're forming those partnerships and relationships, whether it's like a personal one that you're using as a mentor or just connection, when I think of what we do every day in my team now as retail partnerships, a lot of that is like, how do we make it more personal? How do we kind of connect with this third party that we're working together? What are our common goals? And being more open, being more authentic, it just helps make that happen. And then that translates into how you then talk to your travelers, your customers, all of those things. So I wish I'd lent into that a lot more earlier in my career than I guess, you know, I've got there in the end, but that would be my sort of advice of, you know, as people, as they're going through it, doesn't necessarily mean that you might still be in a position where you're kind of thinking, oh, how much should I share? But I think, you know, being that authentic has really helped me as I've kind of progressed, I think.
No, I understand what you're saying. We're in a people's business, and authenticity, ultimately, it's the way of touching people, like, and going deeper into the relationship. So it makes total sense. Thank you for the advice. The next question would be, what helped you get into this particular job and be successful in it?
So I think it probably stems from what I was just talking about in terms of that sort of networking. So I think a lot of the learning that I've kind of had to sort of set me up for success into each of the roles I've moved into has come from that sort of like networking with people above, but also just being really open to learning from people. I think that's also part of that networking piece of like, you know, being curious and asking questions has a lot of the time been very useful for me as I've thought about how I then set myself up for my next role, or my next, it could even just be your next meeting or your next presentation. And I think having that approach of listening, I've sometimes in the past in different roles maybe been given sort of advice of like, oh, you know, be more vocal and like talk, you know, maybe more in meetings and things like that, which yes, you should share your opinions, you know, when you have them and when you think they add value to conversations. But actually what I've found has really helped me is that also taking that active listening role, like really listening, has really then helped me learn what's the landscape of like what I'm trying to achieve or what the business is trying to achieve. Particularly in a partnership role, it would be very easy for me as director to then kind of set a strategy and then say, so all of our partners need to do exactly the same thing all at the same time, and that's what I want to do because it's easily scalable and so forth. Now that's appropriate for some of the stuff that we want to do, but also it's very important for me to then, when we're meeting with partners, really listen to, well, what's happening with their brand, what's happening with their audience, what is it that's their goal? Because if I just set something and say, well, this is how I want to achieve mine, and theirs is like completely different, it's not going to be a very long-term partnership that you're going to work on successfully together. So I think as well as that networking piece, it's also been sort of like trying to refine that active listening and understanding of like, what is it that somebody wants? And I think that's true of we talked about 2 important things that I do on a weekly basis. One is related to those commercial relationships that we have. So that's listening to the partner, as I just mentioned, but it's also true to that other biggest part that I said about team and people management. Yeah. And it's kind of, you know, understanding and listening to your team and people within your organization of like, what do they want to achieve as their career? What is their next step? And just properly listening to that and not necessarily having any preconceptions of like, well, this is your skill set, this is where you should be going. And also not being afraid to kind of lean into whatever it is that they do share with you. You know, how do I help that? Is what they're looking for outside of like my team, my organization? If someone comes to me and says, I want to own my own business, you know, how do you help unlock that? Really listen to what's going to make them sort of, you know, get the most out of your partnership. So
I'm getting like curiosity, never handing like, yeah, active listening, and also being humble, like being really open along the way. It opens you, like it helps you create a big picture that creates synergies with your partners and also with your people on your team.
Absolutely. Yeah, spot on. Well summarized. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. It's very interesting, so it's not difficult to keep the, you know, the main concepts. What are the resources that help you evolve in your career? Queer community, IBGs, LGBT job boards, networks, books, podcasts, e-learning, mentoring people. You already put like a big thing on networking. Could you elaborate with other things that helped you?
Yeah, so I think for me, I guess it's kind of related to network and community, but you mentioned it there, the IBGs. I've always found that as a great place, and perhaps that's, thinking about it now, I haven't necessarily reflected on it, but maybe that's also where I sort of started to trial finding like my true voice of like, you know, sharing a bit more in that sort of like safe space of community, whether it's them being involved in just attending different events that the IBGs have been putting on, to see other people share their stories and like share their authentic selves. I think that's been very useful as part of the IBG communities that we have at Expedia Group, and then also just getting involved in those as well. So then listening to some of those and then starting to get your ideas of like, oh, well, maybe we could do something like this to showcase or support different parts of the community. How does that then translate into what we do on our external facing communications, whether it's through LinkedIn or things like that? So I think my sort of involvement in there, it sort of started off actually as in the volunteer community that we have, in terms of how do we give back to our communities within which we work, and then a lot of day of caring evolving into month of caring. That kind of like started a lot of it, and that helped build my confidence, I think, in terms of where I then found a lot more of my voice to then bring out to my sort of like day-to-day job. So I definitely would recommend that people kind of get involved in all of the IBGs. And I think one of the things that sometimes people can think of is like, oh, well, you know, maybe should I go to all of the Pride sort of things, or should I, you know, join IDEA? So one thing I didn't mention in my introduction is that I'm on the board of IDEA, which is the Indigenous Diversity of Expedians and Allies. But with all of the IBGs, that the allies bit is always a key part of it. So, you know, sometimes people think, oh, should I go to a WELL event if I identify as a man? Yes, you should. And it's about being an ally and kind of building up that network and the understanding and, you know, use of language and all of those different topics that are just useful for everyone to kind of be more aware of. I would say that's been one of my biggest resources that I've kind of lent into. And then what I've also then done is using sort of external either travel industry events, or, you know, maybe sometimes there are affiliate marketing events. Those have also been great places to firstly network, but then also start potentially presenting in different environments and things like that, of like where you can then showcase what you've learned, and then hopefully be a good influence for others to kind of learn from, and also to kind of hear your personal stories. And one thing that I did, I support my university where I studied tourism management, so I give a prize each year to personally as best travel student. You know, the lecturers pick, I don't get to pick who it is. I don't obviously see their work, but they pick. And one of the things that I've done with them is kind of be part of a circuit around different universities called Future U. So for tourism students to hear from people working in the industry, you know, what are the types of jobs that I could do? What should I be thinking about as I kind of like graduate? And I think using that as a network is also interesting, because often we think of mentoring and everything, oh, I should be only talking to more senior people and things like that. But actually working with, you know, people that are just entering the industry to understand like what is their expectation of what they want from a manager, from an organization. It works both ways, right? And I found that really useful. And also that was one of the places where I probably started speaking a bit more publicly to like bigger audiences, because it's a sort of a safe space as well, that it's kind of talking about yourself, your career, and things like that. So trying to find those different pockets of places have been really useful for me, and just getting that different feedback from different age groups, demographics, you know, all different parts of community. I think that's been the most useful.
No, it makes total sense. And I hope hearing you, many people are going to be inspired to take steps to get their voices out if they feel more comfortable inside the community at first, and then getting always like amplifying always a little bit more, and get their talent out there and get their career powered by those connections. So thank you for sharing. Now we're getting to the spiciest questions, the very interesting ones for me. Could you share the biggest learning you had from an obstacle?
Yeah, from an obstacle, I probably would I probably would pick one. So it's about 3 years ago was well, 3 years ago, let's say, it was a very challenging time for everyone. It was the start of the global pandemic, you know, lots of uncertainty and things like that. So everyone was kind of going through lots of challenges on, you know, personal level, like fear, worried about health, you know, missing family, friends, all those types of things. So it was already a challenging time, I think, for everyone globally. Within Expedia, we were also just at the start of quite a large reorganization that the company was going through. And my role was actually, the role I was in at that time was actually impacted within that. You know, so that role was being made redundant. And that's a very challenging time that you're also mixing with pandemic as well. But it was very challenging. What I would say, how I approached it was, okay, so the situation of your role isn't necessarily going to be changing, and also to just try and then really lean into it when I was talking with my manager at the time, to then really know and remind yourself that, like, in a situation like that, it's not personal against, like, we're making Michael's role redundant. It's like, this role is being eliminated from the organization for these business reasons, and whoever it had been, if it hadn't been me in that role, it would have, you know, still had the same outcome. So it's important to kind of remind of those. But I think what I luckily kind of, like, as I went through the process, was lucky enough to find an open role within Expedia to then remain with the organization, which I'm very grateful for. But I guess what I learned most from that is how my manager at the time sort of approached it, to sort of lead with that empathy of, like, understanding how that feels as an individual, to give me space to digest the information, to reassure me and guide me all the way through the process, was something that, as they were doing that, it allowed me to also, as I still was in the business, as the process was unfolding, there were others within my team, within my, you know, friendship network at Expedia Group, that were also impacted. So how I could then lead with that empathy to help them understand that these are the things that are going to happen. These are the things you should consider. These are the questions you need to ask as you prepare for certain meetings and things like that. So whilst it was a very challenging time and a really difficult thing to overcome, I think hopefully what it's then left me with is, firstly, I'm still very grateful to be with such a wonderful organization, but then secondly, it's having been through it, it adds that extra layer of, like, if I were to ever be in a similar situation myself, or anyone in my network comes to me to then say, oh, my role's being impacted, or this is happening in my organization, how do I deal with it? It allows me to kind of lead with empathy, but also then hopefully gain that person's trust of, like, oh, he's been through that. and he understands what it feels like to be in that situation, because it's a very stressful thing for anyone to kind of go through. And I think, as with any kind of experience, if you've had it yourself, if you're either giving advice or just support, when we talk about active listening, sometimes that's all people need in that scenario. They just think, I just want to talk to you and I'm going to talk at you. I don't want any advice, Michael, but I just know you've been through it, so maybe you'll understand what I'm saying. So that was probably the biggest obstacle that I've been through in my career, that, you know, I've got some positives out of it, and hopefully it's made me a better leader, manager, person to work with, colleague, friend.
No, absolutely. I think we all remember this time, and my role was actually made redundant also, and I had the opportunity to stay. So I perfectly understand what you're saying. And what it made me understand also is, like, sometimes a bad news can turn into something great at the end of the way. So it's definitely the way that we approach things. Like, approaching it as a bad thing is never going to be something that will help you. So yeah, just consider that sometimes things happen for a reason, and you're going to be better off at the end of the path. So thank you for sharing. And now, how has your identity influenced your career?
So good question. I think, I guess, as we talked a bit before about where it took me a while to kind of like find my sort of like full voice, how I'm sort of here today. Like, maybe if I think about 20 years ago, would I have turned up to an interview that's potentially being shared across the organization wearing a shirt with ducks on? Maybe I would have been like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't do that. Or like, you know, there should be different things. I guess though, now as I've kind of like lead with my true sort of like full identity and personality, I guess it has helped a lot of those relationships. And I guess in lots of ways, people feel like it enables that trust, because they're like, oh, I trust him when he's saying something to, hopefully that's the case for most people when they meet me, that they kind of think, oh, well, he's being completely himself, and he's shown up as him, and therefore I instantly lead with a trust for him, because he's not trying to hide anything. And so that's what I think probably has been really sort of helpful about like how I identify, and just bringing that completely into all conversations. It's made that a lot stronger, and I think hopefully leading with my full true identity, it also acts as like an inspiration for others as well, because as I was saying, I do work quite a lot with younger students who are then, you know, coming up through hopefully into our industry and maybe our organization. Hopefully it leads to that change as well. So that's what I hope. I have a young niece as well, she's 10. So I do think that it's important, as I think about younger people growing up, I'm always kind of myself with her, and I think that's important for her in terms of a role model, to kind of see that like, oh, that's how he identifies. And you know, it's just important, I think, for especially as we think about you know, the future.
So you've used authenticity as a tool for trust building, right? And inspiration, and also making understandable that not everybody is the same, and that's the beauty of it. Yeah,
exactly that. Yeah. And then wearing a shirt with ducks on sometimes can just be a good conversation starter as well. So that's
don't get me started on your style, which is admired throughout AG. I have some colleagues in London, but we're going to take too much time, and we have to get to the final question. But I love your style, and I think you pull anything off. Like, you're amazing. Anyway, we have to get, for a time constraint, to the last question. So what percentage would you attribute to luck, and which would you say is merit and effort related?
It's a very good question. One that I think I'm going to say, potentially, I'm going to go with, there's no, to clarify, I guess there's no right or wrong to this. So I'm just going to kind of go with what my instinct was going to say. So I would say maybe 60% sort of 60-70% effort, and then there is an element of luck, of like right place at right time, or situations of, you know, roles becoming available, or things like that. So there is an element of timing rather than maybe sort of like luck, let's say, but I guess you could group it together. But I think, yeah, making the conscious effort and, you know, putting yourself out there is definitely a big piece when it comes to sort of careers. But, you know, the luck I would probably rephrase as maybe kind of opportunity that just kind of presents itself. And I think if you then use that sort of 60-70% to kind of make all the right connections, like build on your confidence and put yourself in the right frame of mind, it helps when you then recognize those opportunities that then form that other bit to get you to the 100%, that you recognize it and then go, yeah, I am going to go for that, and I should go for it because I've got the right things. So that's where I'd kind of like place it, sort of like there is an element of luck stroke opportunity.
Now your explanations makes total sense. And I agree with you, like you create also opportunities. So it's like efforts, retro elements, like, you know, the opportunities that you're creating for yourself and the people that you're knowing along the way and everything. So we are finished with the interview. I wanted to thank you so much for participating. Everything you shared was very inspiring, and I hope others will feel empowered to take steps towards getting out there and getting empowered with their development in their career. Thank you again, take care, and we'll see you. I hope I'll see you out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for listening. And if anyone is watching and kind of thinks, hey, I'd like to know more from Michael on this, or I want to talk to, I'm always available. So just reach out, whether that's LinkedIn, email, Slack, grab me for a coffee in the office. Yeah, always happy to chat.
Thank you, Michael. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.